Hello, Bay Ridge. Welcome to another edition of After Hours. We're continuing our look at the 7 root vices. This Sunday, we were looking at the third vice, which is wrath or anger. Had a lot of comments afterwards. Most of us can really understand and relate to this this problem of wrath. We understand this vice. We've experienced, as I said, it was one that I've had much personal experience with. I gave a few practical tips about dealing with it, but what I really want to do in After Hours is delve into a little bit more how wrath roots back to our ultimate dissatisfaction with God, the problem between us and God. All of the vices, every one of them, are about a wrong relationship with God. And we ultimately have to get back to that soil of our disordered love, that soil of also misplaced identity, and how that feeds into the vices, which then feed into sins. And so I want to remind us that all 3 of the vices, they're actually grouped, the 7 vices are grouped into 3, 1, and 3. The first 3 vices, pride, envy, and wrath, are all about a wrong desire relative to God. In pride, we're desiring to be God. I'm elevating myself above God and wanting to be like God. In envy, I'm dissatisfied with the way God has distributed gifts. I want the gifts and the identity He has given to another person rather than what He has given to me. Well, in wrath, as we saw today, it's ultimately rooted in a dissatisfaction with how God is exercising His sovereignty, ultimately the way He's running the universe. He's not enacting justice in the time, manner, and degree that I would approve of. And we're going to see the same thing with the other one. Sloth, which we'll be looking at this coming Sunday, is a vice that stands on its own in some ways because it's really just a dissatisfaction and boredom with God and His works in general. We become slothful because we just simply don't find God, who He is and what He's doing, all that interesting. And then the final 3 vices, greed and gluttony and lust, are all about an inappropriate relationship with the good gifts that God has given to us. Greed is an excessive desire for created things rather than the Creator Himself. Gluttony is an excessive desire for food and drink and trying to fill my spiritual void with physical food. And then lust is ultimately an excessive craving for sex, hoping to find true intimacy and meaning via a sexual relationship rather than with God Himself. Now, what this means for us is with all of these vices, wrath included, they require us doing some real soul work. It requires meditation for us to find out who we are and what's going on. This discerning and rooting out the vices is very important. They help us identify where our soul is being oriented in wrong directions, where we're looking to something other than God. They help us find where our identity is becoming corrosive because we're trying to find who we are and rooting our self-conception in something other than God Himself. And they show us where our love for God is not as deep and as passionate as it ought to be. So it's very critical. I'm trying to help us understand them and think through them, but it all requires extra work on our own. So I encourage you to be going through the devotions that we're giving, to look in the Scripture, to consider wrath and its fruits, and then also the opposing vices that we talked about, learning how to exercise self-control. Working to ultimately develop a gentle spirit. All the things that we were looking at today. But to work on those things, we ultimately have to see and do the work of where am I not loving God as I ought? Because friends, whenever we end up in sin, we can be certain that we put something in the place of God. So I hope this is helpful to you in putting off vice and especially in putting on virtue so we can be more like Jesus, because in finding and knowing and becoming like Him, we find the greatest enjoyment we will have both now and forever. I hope you have a great week. I look forward to seeing everybody this coming Sunday. God bless.